the two-factor theories are the behavioral theories, or the leader behavior theories. Those are the three names I've heard for these theories. Here are the University of Michigan categories: job-centered versus employee-centered. Now look, nobody's 100% one of these, but what they found was, and in the other behavioral studies, they found that people tended to act in one pattern rather than the other. In the job-centered or task-centered or initiating structure-centered or job-centered, they emphasize the tasks. Okay, let's talk about the tasks. They watch employees closely. They often are not just punitive, but they often are very strong carrot and stick. I mean, they're very reinforcement focused. The employee-centered or people-centered are showing consideration, depending on which of the studies you're talking about. I think they converge. They emphasize the personal needs and try to build interpersonal relationships at the workplace. They're more likely to delegate decision, but sharing it with the people. And they're interested in creating a supportive environment. Again, people-centered, and you see this repeated in Ohio State. Here we go again, and somehow we've flipped the two sides. But I'll start over here with initiating structure, which is the job-centered approach. Establish well-defined patterns in the organization and structure, well-defined the procedures. This is the typical bureaucracy, right? Have a real split between the duties and the relationships of, in a formal way with the subordinates. Be very, perhaps, data-driven, not that there's an opposite way, but I mean to be focused only on the number, not the person. Over here in showing consideration, allowing friendships and relationships to build, being aware that there's a trust factor at the workplace and that it matters, depending on and building on and paying attention to the interpersonal relationships and showing support. Again, you see this employee, you see a little bit of this autocratic in the task side, and a little bit more of the democratic on the consideration side. And then we move, okay, well, that's great. There's people with these two tendencies, and maybe there are people who are ambidextrous that can use either hand. Actually, in their studies, they found that that's not what people were like. They did very much tend to behave in a repeatable pattern one way or the other. And, oh, okay, we know that. So, but obviously neither of these is vastly superior to the other. So where are we? So we found how leaders behaved, but so what? And so we really needed some more theories. I cried out for, well, okay, we got this information. What do we do? And the contingency or situational theories, these third set of theories, emerged. And Fiedler's is the transitional form. In evolution, a lot of the argument about whether there's this grand evolutionary pattern is, where's the transitional form? Where's the in-between where you leave one pattern and move entirely to the next? We can see the two patterns, but what about in between? Fiedler does that. Fiedler says, look, let's grab these two styles, relationship and task. It's the same. We've grabbed the behavior theories in item 2, just grabbed them, renamed them. I like the word people in production, task and relationship, but these two patterns, and said, look, I can give you advice about which makes sense if you tell me the situation. Well, I mean, if the situation could be a million factors, still no help. We're still at art, not science. But Fiedler's trying to create science here. And so he says, look, there's lots of situational variables or contingencies, but I think these three are very important. What's the relationship between the boss and the subordinate? What's that relationship like? Is it a good relationship or is it hostile? What about the structure of the job. Is it working on a machine where you have to put one hand here, one hand there, and stick your feet here, and then I don't know, you hit it with your head. What a job. You hit it with your hand every 5 seconds. That's a highly structured job. Or is it a manager's job? And I don't think a manager's job was hardly ever contemplated, but is it a manager's job where you honestly may not know what you're going to do exactly in the next 8 minutes because you have 80 things to do today. And so, uh, and so hard to see these being exactly the same, and the same kind of leadership may be needed in a very highly structured environment for that job, and a job that has much less structure. And finally, how much power does the leader have? Do they have a lot of power and a lot of reinforcement tactics available to them, or do they not? And do they have many sources of power? French and Raven's 5 sources of power. Do they have sources of power, or do they not? And based on the matrix of high and low on these 3 situations or contingencies, Fiedler then has advice. Now memorize this and have it for recitation in next class. No. But he does have a plug-in here, and look where it takes you. Where things are moderate, he says, build the relationship. Have that kind of leader. Where things are disfavorable at either wing of the distribution, are highly favorable, he says, use the task leader. Now, I'll let you study that, but this point, do you change the leader or change the leader? In other words, if things move from hostile to sort of average, then what do you do? Do you fire that supervisor or leader? Or is that leader able to modify her or his approach to become, let's say, a task-oriented leader now, no longer needing to invest in the people things, because a lot of that's been accomplished if you've moved from medium to highly favorable? I think it's a question that Fiedler does not answer. Do you replace the person? Do you change the leader? Or does the leader change? Do you change the leader? Do I become task-oriented as a leader? I think that's not answered by Fiedler, at least. Path goals listed, and they're working the expectancy theory into that. But I would tell you, I've met and spent time with Bob House at the Wharton School in during my education at IU. He's a great guy, and he would boil path goal down to the leader enunciates the goal and keeps that in front of the group, and then helps on the path. It's a servant leadership theory, and I think then authors just go off in different directions upon that basis, and including your authors. There are a lot of situational factors. I mentioned this before. And then we have these additional modern, we might call them leadership theories, and it's just an excuse to have an etc. category, I think. And there's only one I want to talk about, and that's transactional and transformational leadership. Bass gives us this situation between a transactional and transformational. And I'll just stay with this a minute. His idea is that leaders do break down into one or the other set of behaviors. And I smell a situation here, okay, where that leadership style here is prescribed. But the transformational leader is changing the organization through using the artifacts of the culture. The transformational leader, Bass says this, and I'm repeating, The transformational leader changes the organization by using the culture, by changing the culture, by using the artifacts of the culture to change the culture and then therefore the organization. That's what the transformational leader is doing. The transactional leader is efficiently and effectively, these are both good. One is not good and the other bad. These are both effective styles. The transactional leader is effective by knowing how exactly the organization operates it and operates it effectively and efficiently. Um, when a president, and presidents are always bad examples, I think, till you think about it corporately, but there's two campaigns. I was taught this in political science. There's not three, there's only two. You see it over and over. It's either time for a change, I'm a transformational leader, or stay the course. Time for a change, stay the course. And once the president gets in, whether it's George Bush or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, they come in transformational. Time for a change. Smile, okay, my smiley face in there. And amazingly, 3 years later, and I think President Obama probably started running for re-election 6 months ago. So 2.5 years into it, I think they all do. 2.5 years into the presidency, running again. Stop governing and start running, campaigning again. And the campaign is hold the course. It's amazing how it changes. And the opponent over here is time for a change. So organizations go through the same thing. It is stay the course, run it effectively and efficiently. Transactional leader knows everything about it, probably an insider, probably a technocrat, knows where all the bodies are buried, knows where all the phones ring, knows how to save a nickel on every foot of lumber. Isn't that something like that, the quote, and It's a Wonderful Life? And really knows the place inside and out. This, by the way, is a leader that's really respected and liked, usually within the organization, a transactional leader. He knows the transactions, things to do, transactions within that organization. And it's often the most feared leader then is the transformation leader. Time for change. And changing ICOCA, changing the organization through wisely and carefully manipulating, doing many things, but changing the culture by manipulating the artifacts of the culture and therefore changing the organization. I hope this has been helpful.